What I really love about the today's traps is that they are very simple and actionable. They are happening in the Italian game, which is the most popular opening choice for amateur players. And here we're going to be going over the most common lines, most popular lines, and I'll show you simple ways to win in different variations of the Italian game. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov, and let's get right into it. The first line starts with the move knight to c3, knight to f6, nothing fancy, just standard development moves, and here you go with bishop to g5. But the intent is not what your opponent thinks it is. Your opponent probably assumes that you want to put the pin on this knight and then to try to somehow put more pressure onto this knight in the future. And that is why they usually play pawn to h6, trying to push your bishop away, thinking that you're gonna go bishop h4, trying to maintain this pin. But you've got another idea here. You take here on f6, and your opponent is happy at this point. They think, okay, I managed to get rid of this pin easily. But then you go knight to d5, which creates this double threat, fork to the pawn and the queen, and therefore to protect both of them, the only way to do that is to bring the queen back to d8, and there you go with pawn to c3. Now it looks like you switch to the positional style of playing, just controlling the center, etc., and they usually go bishop to e6 to also maintain their presence in the center. But all of a sudden it turns out that this move bishop to e6, which looks as such a standard development move, it's actually a losing mistake. So there you go with pawn to d4. And all of a sudden, your pawns are gonna target these three minor pieces, and it is very likely that you're gonna actually capture one of them within the next few moves. Let's take a look. Let's say they trade here on d4, you recapture. Now they're still going to be doing something about this bishop because it's intact. What can they possibly do? If they retreat with their bishop back to b6, let's say, then you take the bishop, and after this exchange, you've got the killer move pawn to d5 with a double attack to the bishop and the knight, and one of the pieces will be gone. So that is not an option for black. Let's take a move back, and let's see if black can do anything else here, instead of bishop to b6. If they take here on d5, then they fall into another problem. Pawn takes, and now your pawns simultaneously attack these minor pieces, and again they're going to lose one of them. They can give this check bishop b4, but it does not really help, because after you move your king away, and they move their knight away, you then still have the winning move queen to a4 with a double attack to the king, as well as the bishop, therefore winning the bishop on the next move. Alright, we're going back to the starting position of this forcing line. We already know that bishop b6 doesn't work, taking here on d5 doesn't work. What if they try bishop b4, trying to escape that way? Then you take on b4, and here once again they have a sad choice between two pretty bad moves. So if they take on b4, they run into the trouble we are already familiar with. Queen to a4 check with a double attack to the king and the minor piece, in this case, the knight. And if they try knight c6 back, then another standard move, pawn to d5, this time double attack by the pawn, and one of the pieces is gone. And the final line which we need to analyze is if they go bishop b4 check, you take it, and they decide to, instead of taking your knight, to take your bishop here on c4. That is still bad for them, because after an exchange on c6, you've got a follow-up attack, queen c2, putting pressure along this c-file to the bishop as well as the pawn. So the pawn cannot easily go back, or else you would capture that pawn for nothing. And that is still the best option for black to do, to just give up this pawn, which gives them a bad position, but at least they can continue playing. But if they try to hold on to this pawn and play bishop b5, then you play pawn to a4, driving this bishop away, and after bishop a6, not only they lose this pawn anyway, but now you're delivering this double attack to the bishop and the king, thus winning the bishop on the next move. It's a really cool opening line where you set this clever trap along the way without playing any weird moves, and also black's moves are so natural that you are guaranteed to win a number of games just by following this opening trap. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, and let's move on. The next game is absolutely mind-blowing. Not only it's a great trap for you to use in your games, but the game is just one of my all-time favorite ones. It was played between Nor against Chigorin. So we're starting off with the Italian game, as always, and after white castles, black goes knight f6, so this time, obviously, we're analyzing it from the black perspective, and now, by playing these moves, you allow them to go bishop g5. That's the move which a lot of them love playing, and indeed, in some variations, it can be powerful, but there are a couple, like, very nuanced ideas that your pawns are likely to be unaware of. So if they go bishop g5 right here, then you push it back with pawn to h6. Now notice that in contrast to the previous trap which we analyzed, white already had their knight to be on c3, so they could easily bring it to d5 and start some attack. In this case, instead of putting their knight to c3, they castled, and so they do not have that possible attacking option. So playing h6 is perfectly fine here. And now if they go back bishop h4, you keep pushing it with pawn to g5, bishop g3, pawn to h5. All of a sudden you're starting this massive kingside storm seemingly out of nothing, because white was trying to actually create some threats on the kingside, but all of a sudden you turn the table and you become an aggressor here. Although it looks like some unprepared hasty attack, but in reality it's definitely not easy for white to cope with it. First of all, the black's threat here is just to play pawn to h4 and grab this bishop because it has no square to retreat. What can white do about this? If they try some standard moves such as pawn to h3, this weakens their king, and then you just push the pawn forward, g4, and after an exchange, it's already clear that thanks to your rook on h8, you've got this open file near to the white's king, and now ideally you only need to bring your queen somehow on this h-file and deliver a checkmate. Of course, you can't do it that magically as I can with my mouse, but still, after a couple of moves of preparation, you can do this. And just to demonstrate the power of the black's attack, let me show you one possible variation here. If let's say they go knight to g5, you can go knight h5, which opens up the queen, attacking the knight, as well as attacks this bishop here on g3. And since their knight is attacked, they'll need to do something. Let's say they take here, thinking that they're now attacking you, but all of a sudden knight takes g3. You're sacrificing the queen, but also you take advantage of the beam so that the knight cannot be captured. And after they grab your queen, you play rook to h1, nice sweet checkmate with the rook from h8, pretty cool line. Therefore, white cannot refute your attack that easily just by playing a defense move pawn to h3. But what if they just take them with their knight here right away? That's what they did in the game, threatening the f7 square, but black played h4, nevertheless, still capturing the bishop, has no retreat square. White took an f7 thinking that now, thanks to their attack to your queen as well as the rook, they're gaining some temples and hopefully winning some materials, but black just ignored it and played pawn takes g3. A fascinating move, sacrificing the queen, and here they made the move which is just inhuman, you know, from another planet guy. He came here and played the move bishop g4. While black just sacrificed the queen, and they have a lot of options to capture something around the white's weak king, instead of all that, they're just bringing a piece into play. And before you think that it's something completely crazy, let's try to find the reason for this move. The black's point is that the white's king is terribly weak. Thanks to the pressure that your bishop puts here, as well as your rook supports it along the h-file, and of course your key pawn on g3, which is ready to capture one of the pawns, the white's king is on the brink of disaster. It's nearly checkmated, but at the moment you don't have enough pieces to actually deliver that checkmate. You'd love to have one more piece into the attack so that you can actually put together a checkmating position. And that is why black aims for bringing one more piece into play. So they go bishop g4, but of course it also attacks the queen, so white just played queen d2. And again, black played a super calm move. Instead of taking this knight with the rook or something, they just play knight d4. Once again, they're bringing one another piece into the attack, and this time it actually does create a threat. The threat of knight takes to e2 check to the king, and after that, rook takes h2 checkmate. If you can visualize this line, great. So on the next move, black has something ready. White said, okay, why not to just play knight to c3? Not only I developed the knight, I cover this square. Now I'm doing perfectly fine, right? And black said no. And after that, they played knight to f3, sacrificing the knight. And after this exchange, all of a sudden it turned out that there is no defense that white has against the shocking checkmate move pawn takes h2 checkmate. That is again something completely out of the ordinary. I'm sure the white player was stunned seeing these moves coming, and all these surprises keep coming one after another. And if white takes here with their own pawn, then rook h1 checkmate comes from this square h1. Again, super cool game, and again, a useful trap, useful idea for you to remember and execute in your games. Let's go over the main attacking idea once again, just so that you can remember it. First of all, it's important that you still keep your rook on h8, therefore you do not castle too early. You wait for them to bring their bishop out to g5, thinking that they're attacking you, but all of a sudden you can grasp the initiative here by starting to push your kingside pawns forward, aiming to at least capture the bishop, or at best to checkmate their king. That's a really cool attack that you can execute. And even though this trap is of course one of my favorite because it's also so beautiful, there are also a couple other traps which are maybe less spectacular but super effective as well, so stay tuned, let me show you them as well. And the next one is an old trap which is potentially known by some of your opponents, but when I checked the database I was surprised to see that so many players did not know how to react here. And the move is knight going here to d4. That's a very kind of unusual looking move because you're moving the same piece twice, which is not recommended generally speaking. On top of that, you're losing this pawn on e5, which also creates the threat to this pawn on f7. So the move knight to d4 looks like a very beginner level bad mistake, but instead here you've got a quick attack with queen to g5, which puts under the fire this knight as well as the pawn on g2. Now, actually, it turns out that it's certainly not easy for white to escape from this, and at this point they realize that they were probably trapped, but it's already too late, because their knight is being attacked. So what can they do? If they take here this pawn, you take on g2, taking the rook on f1, and not only the rook, after you capture the rook on h1, it's almost a checkmate. Therefore, they would probably wish to move here to f1 into safety, but there comes queen to e4 check, bishop to e2, and the knight delivers this nice smothered checkmate. Again, it's an old trap. Of course, some of your opponents will be aware of it, but the good news here is that, you know, even if they don't fall for the trap, your position is still okay. You didn't sacrifice any material or anything fancy, and you can just play on. Also, if you want to know a couple more variations that could arise from this opening trap, I'll put the link to another video which I already recorded about this, so we can check a couple other options that white has here and how should you respond. Alright, now let's try to even the score for white and black victories, and this time we're playing white, and we're going to the classical Italian game with pawn to c3, and after knight to f6, pawn goes to d4. Now, you're attacking the bishop, so they will probably need to trade and deliver this check on b4. You're going knight to c3. Now you have these two beautiful central pawns ready to push forward and attack black's knights. Therefore, they're more or less forced to capture your pawn, and then you castle. White's aiming for quick development, trying to develop an attack against the black centralized king. And here black would either take here with the knight or with the bishop. I'll not go into the details of the Italian game. Also, I have another video about that, which you may wish to check out later, where I also analyze both the moves and show you some killing ideas there. But let's just go into the main line, which is bishop takes c3, pawn goes to d5, keeping up the pressure, and while the bishop goes back, you go rook to e1. White is always trying to put more pressure on black, and here they're putting pressure onto the e-file, trying to win the knight and get to the black's king. And the knight on c6 is still hanging, therefore likely black will move it back. Now rook takes e4, and finally when black thinks that they can castle and put their king to safety, you can put problems for them by playing pawn to d6. This move does not attack black's king anymore, but it simply blockades the black's queenside pieces, so it's not easy for them to bring them out. And if they try knight f5 to attack your queen, you just go queen d5 back. From here, the queen also attacks the knight, therefore black would need to protect it, so they go pawn to d6. At this point, they're happy. They think that, okay, I managed to put my king in safety. I kind of pushed this queen back, and now I'm ready to maybe play bishop e6 or something else. And they're thinking that all is good. But here, you've got a very evil trap. And if you ever execute it, that is just, you know, a dream come true, because here you've got the move knight to g5. What's the point? Well, the initial intent is clear, just to capture the pawn, right? Because you also have this battery. Your piece is lined up against the pawn and potentially the king. But of course, black will think, okay, I can just take it, right? And after white takes, black can recapture, winning the material. So at first sight, it seems that white just miscalculated this exchange on g5. They miscalculated that they're actually losing a piece there. But that's not the end, because here you got to think about this position and write it down in the comments below. How will you play right here? Because if you can find it, you will also remember this line much better. So write it down in the comments below. And if you can't find it, just study the comments from other people. We've got a lot of strong players there, so definitely somebody will find the winning shot. And here comes the final trap for today. Again, very practical. You can definitely win a lot of games by following the moves that I'm gonna share with you. So here, instead of going into these forcing and a little bit more complicated lines starting from pawn to c3, you simply castle and you just aim for normal development. Black goes knight f6, knight c3, they go, let's say, d6, pawn on d3, they castle, bishop g5. That is a very standard position, and lots of club players play just like that. But here there are a couple very important things that you gotta know so that you don't just get an equal symmetrical position out of the opening, but you actually win. So that's important, right? After you bring your bishop to g5, they're likely to push it back by playing h4. Bishop goes back here to h4. Playing g5, it's just a side note that if they play g5 right here, it's not as strong compared to one of the previous traps we analyzed, because you can notice that the black's rook is no longer on h8. Black castled, and therefore that rook cannot possibly, start this assault on the king side. And therefore, this move does not really do that much. You can actually sacrifice the knight here, which I would recommend for blitz games, because even though there is no direct winning for you here, overall you're having this long-term initiative because the king is exposed, and you can attack it either by bringing the queen here, maybe by bringing the knight, or maybe you can move the king away, and after that push h4 so that your rook starts playing here. So you've got a lot of threats, and in a blitz game it's really hard for black to cope with them. Alright, let's go back. I just wanted to make that point clear that g5 is not dangerous for you. But usually they don't. They actually go bishop g4. Thinking that, again, they're getting somewhat like a symmetric position. And here, the mistake which lots of white players play here is that they're just going knight d5 right here, trying to put pressure onto this knight, which makes sense because the knight is pinned and you want to put more pressure. But here, black can neutralize it very easily by playing pawn to g5 at this point. And now, yeah, I mean, they neutralize the pin, so there's nothing you can do. And you can't also sacrifice it right here, because in this case, you would lose the queen, right? So, I mean, that's just not the way for white to go about this. But here's the thing, you just need to play h3 yourself first, which, again, at first your opponent will probably not understand your intent. They'll think that you're just trying to push the bishop back. But after bishop h5, you follow up with pawn to g4, and once the bishop comes to g6, you then play knight to d5. And here's the important difference. This time, because of this bishop, the pawn can no longer move and cannot play g5 to block your bishop to cut it off. And now, with the support of this bishop and this knight, you are actually putting this really deadly attack against black. And there is no way out. There is nothing black can do to stop you, while you can keep pushing and keep bringing more pieces to attack black. So this position is actually technically already winning for white. Let me just show you what can happen possibly afterwards. Let's say they go knight e4, which is something they usually do. You can just trade and, let's say, play pawn to c3, kicking it away. And after that, queen comes to f3, and now there is already no way for black to save their knight. They can never move it away, because otherwise they would lose the queen. And if they do anything else, you just take it happily, take it with the bishop. And now after something like this, you're getting definitely winning position, because you've got this extremely strong bishop. The black skin is exposed, terribly weak. If you can just bring your queen somehow through one of the squares, there, or through g3, maybe like this, you would win the game. Maybe you cannot do it right away, but within the next couple of moves you will. Or at least you'll get a decisive advantage. There is a lot you can do here. For simplicity, you can just play rook d1 and maybe break through in the center with pawn to d4. And after that, let me just play some random move for black just to show you the white ideas. After that, you get this e3 square for your queen. If they trade off this pawn from e5, your queen can also go through this route and also checkmate black. And again, you're pawn up, you're getting a much more active position, so that should normally guarantee your win. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel to not miss out on my next videos, and you may also wish to check out my free masterclass where I teach you how you can find similar powerful moves yourself without relying on memorizing opening lines or opening traps. So click the link on the screen or below the video and check this out.